now. Hi, thank you for tuning in and watching this session on seed harvesting from the Belleville Public Library. With me today, I have Amanda Hill, who is the archivist from the Belleville and Hastings County Archives. I hope I got that right. And she is also a gardener extraordinaire, so she's going to talk to us a little bit today about seed harvesting. So without further ado, here is Amanda. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Virginia, for that introduction. Yes, so in my day job, I'm the archivist at the Community Archives of Belleville and Hastings County. But when I'm at home, I'm sort of really into growing my own vegetables and fruit. And so this presentation is a reflection of that side of my life. Sowing seeds and growing seeds is just such a satisfying thing to do, and sort of once you start growing vegetables for any length of time, collecting seeds from those vegetables to grow again seems like a logical next step. So that's the way that I got into this. So this presentation, let me just get this running. There we go. Right, so this presentation covers the following topics: why we might want to save seeds, how seeds are actually produced, how to save certain types of seeds. I'll just cover a few varieties in this presentation, but there's obviously a lot to learn about this particular topic. How we best keep seeds so that they stay fresh for future years, and some information about where to find out more if you get into this topic. There's all sorts of resources out there to find out more about this. So why do people save seeds? There's a whole raft of reasons, but these are some of the most popular reasons why people would save seeds. One thing is that if you carry on growing the same variety in your garden for years and years, it gradually adapts to the surrounding conditions in your area. So one of the reasons that people save seeds is because those plants have adapted over time to grow well in our particular climate conditions. Some of these seeds have been around for centuries, and some of them have amazing stories. So just by sowing those seeds another year, you're extending that story behind that seed. Some people like to be self-sufficient in seeds, so that's another good reason for collecting seeds from the plants that you're growing. And of course, if you're collecting seeds, you're not having to buy them, so you're going to be saving money. So in order to understand how best to collect seeds and save them, we need to really know what seeds represent and how they're produced in the first place. So I like this diagram because it really illustrates how a flower becomes a fruit. You can see the various parts of the flower and how they develop into a fruit in the case of this tomato. So what happens in plant reproduction is that a grain of pollen will fertilize one of the ovules in a flower, and that combination of the pollen and the ovule will become a seed, which is a potential future plant. So what you're looking at in a tomato is part of the parent plant, but only half of the parent plant, only half of the seed. So the seed is a combination of the pollen, which may come from a different plant, and the ovule from that fruit. So I think this diagram illustrates that really well. So the fruit is part of the mother plant, but the seeds inside it are a combination of the two parents. So if you want to save seed from a plant and grow exactly the same fruit again next year, you need to be aware that the pollen has to come from the same type of plant, because if it comes from a different plant, you'll end up with a mixture of the two. So this is something we need to bear in mind when we're thinking about saving seeds for the future. So there's lots of different types of flowers that have developed during the millennia that plants have been on the planet. So I'm just going to cover a few of the different types of flower here. Top right is the tomato again, and this is a closed flower. The way that tomatoes have been developed over the years, they now pretty much don't let insects into the flower, so you can pretty much be sure that the tomato is fertilized by its own pollen, so it's not going to be cross-pollinated by another type of tomato. And the same is true of peas and beans. So these three crops pretty much are pollinated by the flower itself. So there's no external pollen coming into them. The other types of flowers which I'm showing here are insect pollinated. So that's a pepper flower in the middle picture. So insects can transfer pollen within the flower itself, but also from other pepper flowers that are growing nearby. And with squash flowers, the flower itself is either a male or a female flower. So you can see the female flower on the left there has an immature fruit behind it. That's a butternut squash before it develops. And the one on the right is a male flower. You can see there isn't a fruit underneath the flower. So with squash flowers, there's the inside of the male flower on the left there. You can see the grains of pollen, and there's a bee busy eating the pollen or gathering the pollen. And there on the right is the female flower. So it doesn't have pollen, but insects will visit it because it does have nectar. So they will transfer the pollen from the male flower when they visit the female flower. So what does that mean in terms of seed saving? Well, basically the self-pollinators, where they're a closed flower, they're easy to save seed from because you can be fairly sure they haven't been cross-pollinated by insects and other varieties. But with the insect-pollinated ones, it's a bit more complicated. So we have to be a bit more careful about how we save seed from the sorts of plants that are insect-pollinated. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail in a second. But before you even start to think about collecting seeds, you have to think about the sorts of seeds that you're sowing in the first place, because if you want to save seed, you have to grow plants that are open pollinated or heirloom plants rather than commercially produced hybrid plants, because the hybrid plants will not produce plants that are like the parent. So bear that in mind. I mean, you can save seed from them, but what you'll get is not like the plant that you took the seed from in the first place. So be careful what you're buying in the way of plants in the first place. So definitely go for the heirloom varieties if you see them advertised, because those will produce the same sort of plant the following year. So I just want to talk about some of the easier seeds to save seeds from, so easier plants rather. So this peas and beans are probably the easiest plants to start with if you're a complete beginner. So basically it's very simple. You just let the peas and the beans ripen on the pod. So don't pick them, leave them on the plant, leave the pods on the plant and let them dry out. And then when they're completely dry and brown like the ones you see here, you can just harvest the peas or the beans and just empty out the seeds, and they should be completely dry. You can let them dry in the house for a while if you think they're not hard enough, because you don't want them to go moldy, especially with beans. Just leave them for a week or so, just like I have here, and they'll get really hard and dry, and that's how you want to keep them. And so the same with the peas. Once they're completely dry, you can store them. Just label them with the variety and with the date that you collected them, and you can keep them for another year. And just a quick growing tip about peas. I find that if you sow dry peas in the garden, they get in where I live anyway, they get eaten by mice. So I always soak pea seeds for 24 hours and then just keep them in those jars, but without the water, for a couple more days, just rinsing them once a day with water, and then they start to sprout. And at that point, that's when I sow them in the garden, because I find that the mice won't eat them if they've already started to grow, if they're nice and plump like that. They like them when they're dry. So just a little tip there about growing peas. So herbs are similar. Normally you only grow one variety of herb in the garden, so although they are open pollinated by insects, there's usually no problem with getting pollen from a different variety because you've only got the one. So with this is cilantro, so I just let it flower, and then the flowers will turn into these coriander seeds, which you can then just rub off the plant and store for next year. Or of course, with coriander, you can use it in cooking. So these are the ones that flowered this year. I've already collected the seeds from those, and then I also sowed some of them to get a fall crop of cilantro. So these are my little cilantro seedlings just coming up now. Lettuce is another fairly straightforward crop that you can take seeds from. So when your lettuce starts to bolt, it sends up a flower stalk, and on the top of the flower stalk you get lots and lots of little flower heads like this. They only open very briefly for like half an hour each, but you get quite a lot of heads per plant, as you can see here. So, and they open over a period of a week or two. So you can see the flower, and in this sort of flower there's the way the flowers grow, that's a composite flower, so there's lots and lots of flowers in that flower head, about 20 flower heads. And the way that the pollen and the female part of the flower grow, they nearly always self-pollinate, even though it's an open flower. So you can be fairly sure that the seeds you collect from lettuce will be the same. They'll grow into a plant that's the same as the parent plant. So the way that the lettuce flower develops, you can see there, it looks a bit like a dandelion. So you've got the seeds of the lettuce attached to little like dandelion heads. So you can just rub those open. So here's one I just dissected, so you can see what it looks like. So there's the attached to the parachute of the flower head. You can just collect these and then sow them again for a fall crop, like I did with the cilantro, or you can label them, put them in an envelope and label them and sow them again next year. Tomatoes are a bit more complicated because although the flower is closed, so there's no problem with cross-pollination with tomato seeds. As you know, when you eat a tomato, there's always that sort of jelly layer that you get on a tomato seed. So we have to process the seed a little bit before you can save it. And the way you do that is to squeeze the tomato seeds into a jar, just from one variety, obviously, otherwise you won't know what the variety is. So just do it for each variety that you want to save, just save them into separate jars. So squeeze the seeds into a jar with a little water, and then you just let them sit for a few days. And what happens is the gel around the seeds will rot away, and you get a sort of layer of disgusting muck on top of the water, and then you can just pour that off, and the seeds are left behind. They sink to the bottom of the water. And then you can just rinse those in a strainer just to take any residual stuff off, and then leave them on like a metal tray just to dry, and then you can pack them in labelled envelopes. So these are ones I did for a Seedy Saturday a couple of years ago, and they don't have dates on, but you should put the date on it so you know when you save those seeds. We talked about peppers before in terms of the flowers. So they're open flowers that are insect pollinated. Before I knew anything about seed saving at all, I thought I would save some seeds from my tomato peppers. That's the one on the left here. They're a really nice sweet pepper. So I just saved some seeds from some ripe peppers. It's always best to wait till the plant gets completely ripe before you save the seeds. So I saved some seeds, and then I grew them again the following year. And most of them were fine. They were like the ones that I'd grown the year before, but there were some that were really, really hot, like a chili pepper. And I had been growing chili peppers not too far away from the tomato peppers. So obviously they'd become cross-pollinated with the chili peppers. So that's how I learned about the importance of separating different varieties when it's an insect-pollinated open flower. So the recommendation for sweet peppers is that you keep different varieties of peppers 45 meters or yards apart. And with hot peppers, the recommendation is that you keep different varieties 200 meters apart. And I wasn't clear about why there's such a big difference, but apparently it's to do with the design of the flower. So this here is a picture of a hot pepper, and it's got a longer female part. The style is longer in a hot pepper than it is in a sweet pepper, so it's easier for pollen to get transferred from different varieties if it's a hot pepper from the pollen to the style. So that's why there's a big difference between the recommended distances. So obviously if you've only got a small plot, it's not really feasible to have a 200-meter gap. So you maybe only want to grow one variety of hot pepper or one variety of sweet pepper if you're wanting to guarantee that you only get the same variety that you've been growing before, or just grow one variety of pepper. Yeah, there's ways around it, or you buy seeds, which is what I tend to do, I must admit, because all of my peppers are close together. Okay, so that's peppers. Squash, gourds, melons and cucumbers are all similar, and they're more complicated to get seeds from because they're open pollinated, which means that insects visit them all the time. So for these plants, you need to intervene in a massive way to stop nature taking its course. So basically, if you see the flowers like this, they're just about to open, so insects probably haven't been visiting them yet. So you stop them opening by taping them up. So this is a male flower, you just tape it up. And the same with female flowers that are in the same state of readiness. And then the next day you open up the male flower and let basically just transfer pollen from that flower to the female flower. Then you can tape the female flower up again, mark it somehow with some ribbon or string around the stem, and you now know that and tape it shut so that insects cannot visit it with different types of pollen. So you now know that you've pollinated that flower with the same variety of pollen, and those seeds will produce plants that are the same as the parent plant. So they're a bit more work. And so there's the male flower and the female flower, just to remind you what those look like. So that's how you would get true seed from a squash or a cucumber. So keeping seeds, bear in mind that what you need for germinating seeds is moisture, warmth and light. So what you need to not germinate seeds and keep them for longer is dryness, cold and darkness. So seed vaults are kept quite cold. I usually keep my seeds just in the refrigerator so that and that seems to work pretty well. Seeds keep quite well there. Most seeds will last for 5 years. There's different sorts of seeds last different lengths of time, but on average, most seeds will keep for 5 years if you have them in a cold and dry environment. And as I say, always label the seed envelope or container with the variety and the date of collection so you know how long you're going to be able to keep it for. So this is the Bible from my point of view, how to save your own seeds from seeds of diversity. I find this a really helpful book on just basic advice on how to save seeds from lots of different varieties of vegetable, herbs and flowers. Seeds of Diversity have their own website, which is also worth a look. And there's in the US, there's Seed Savers Exchange, which is also helpful and has some good advice for beginners in this area. And the library here has these 3 volumes available, and that 2 of them are also available through the Hoopla service too. So you can have a look at those and find out more. And that's it. Thanks for listening.
Okay, wow. I am really glad that I approached you, Amanda, about this because that was very informative and I really enjoyed listening to that. So I hope everybody else does as well. So thank you very much for doing this with us. And I really appreciate you taking the time and spreading some of your knowledge around, like seeds.
Thanks, Virginia.
Thanks. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks. Bye.